June 6th, 1944, D-Day. The beaches of Normandy roared under German fire as Allied troops fought their way through smoke and chaos. Behind them rolled the machines meant to support the greatest invasion in history, the American M4 Sherman tanks. German officers had seen these tanks before, and they mocked them openly, calling them Tommy Cookers and Ronsons, because, like a famous lighter, they seemed to light the first time, every time. To the Germans, the Sherman was a joke underarmed, under-armoured, and easily destroyed by their Panthers and Tigers. But that laughter would not last. Soon a new variant would appear, slipping from hedgerows and ambush positions with a gun powerful enough to punch through German armour at ranges their crews never expected. That tank was the Sherman Firefly, a machine that turned the fear and fire of armoured combat back onto the German elite. To understand why the Firefly shocked the German army so completely, we need to understand why the Sherman was mocked in the first place. World War II was not only a clash of nations, but a competition of engineering. Germany built Predators thickly armoured, heavily armed beasts like the Tiger and Panther designed for dominance in one-on-one duels. The Allies, by contrast, built workhorses. The standard Sherman was reliable, easy to produce, easy to repair, and could be shipped across oceans in massive numbers. But in terms of raw firepower and armour, it was badly outmatched. In 1944, these two philosophies collided on the fields and hedgerows of France, where the Sherman-esque weaknesses became painfully obvious. German tank aces like Wittmann saw Shermans as targets rather than threats, and battle after battle highlighted their vulnerabilities. A gun that struggled to penetrate German frontal armour, a tall silhouette that made them easy to spot, and armour that could be sliced through by high-velocity 75mm and 88mm guns. Yet the Shermans kept coming. They were fast, mobile, mechanically dependable, and present in overwhelming numbers. Still, the Allies understood that numbers alone couldn't solve everything, not against German heavy armour that could kill a Sherman at twice the range a Sherman could respond. What the Allies needed was not a new tank, but a new weapon, and it would come not from the Americans, but from British engineers who looked at the Sherman and saw potential. They knew the 17-pounder anti-tank gun was one of the few in the West capable of piercing a Panther or Tiger from a respectable distance, and if they could fit that cannon into the Sherman S turret, everything would change. It was a crazy idea, at first even considered impossible, but desperation in Normandy left no room for hesitation. British crews cut, welded, and re-engineered the Sherman S interior, shifting radios, modifying the breech, and redesigning recoil systems just to make room for the massive gun. But they did it, and in the weeks after D-Day, the first Sherman Fireflies rolled into combat. German officers who laughed at Shermans soon found themselves staring down a long, deadly barrel capable of killing their best tanks before they even realised a Firefly was nearby. This is the story of how the Allies turned a mocked machine into a tank the Germans feared. As the summer of 1944 unfolded, the Sherman Firefly quietly began reshaping the balance of armoured power in Western Europe. Unlike the standard Sherman with its short, stubby 75mm gun, the Firefly carried the long, imposing British 17-pounder, a weapon that looked almost comically oversized on the American-built tank. But that long barrel meant everything. It meant that, for the first time in the Western theatre, an Allied tank could reliably penetrate the frontal armour of a Panther, or even a Tiger at combat range. Yet the Firefly's effectiveness came not simply from its firepower, but from how it was deployed. The British understood immediately that German tank commanders prioritised eliminating threats based on recognition. The tall Sherman silhouette, the familiar rounded turret, the boxy hull. By contrast, German tankers had never before faced a Sherman with a gun capable of killing them first. To preserve this advantage, Allied crews developed clever tricks to disguise the Firefly. They painted the extended barrel with counter-shading dark on top, light underneath to make it appear shorter. Some units even attached fake muzzle brakes or canvas wraps to confuse German observers. Vehicles would position themselves slightly behind or to the side of standard Shermans, hiding their barrels among hedgerows or rubble until the moment to strike arrived. By the time a German Panther commander realised he was staring at a Firefly, and not a regular Sherman, it was usually too late. Fireflies were often placed at key overwatch points or hull-down positions, where only the turret and gun were visible. From these spots they could command whole fields, intersections or hedgerow lanes. They became ambush predators in a battlefield the Germans believed they dominated. The first major demonstration of the Firefly's deadly potential came in the immediate aftermath of Operation Overlord. As British and Canadian units pushed through the Bocage country, those dense, tangled hedgerows that made every advance a brutal, claustrophobic fight, they encountered Panther and Tiger tanks tasked with halting the Allied breakout. The Firefly crews, knowing their tanks were rare and precious, took on a role similar to snipers. They were not intended to lead armoured assaults or absorb the initial shock of enemy fire. Instead, they waited, concealed, until a German tank exposed itself. Then, with a crack and flash brighter than any Sherman gun, the 17-pounder spoke. Often, one or two Fireflies could halt or repel entire German armoured counterattacks. German officers had been confident that their armour superiority would offset Allied numbers and mobility. Now, suddenly, their mathematical advantage vanished. A Panther that previously took 5, 10, sometimes 15 hits from a regular Sherman before being crippled could now be destroyed with a single well-placed shot. Even the WWII with its thick frontal armour was vulnerable. In battles around Caen, Sinto and the approaches to the Falaise pocket, Tiger commanders were stunned when tanks they believed invincible were penetrated from distances they thought safe. But the Firefly was more than just a weapon. It was a psychological shift. British and Canadian crews, who had previously dreaded duels against Panthers and Tigers, now carried a sense of equal footing, even superiority. Stories spread quickly among Allied troops, stories of lone Firefly gunners knocking out multiple German heavy tanks in minutes, of ambushes that shattered elite SS armour spearheads, of German commanders ordering their men to prioritise the destruction of any Sherman with a suspiciously long gun barrel. Indeed, it wasn't long before German tankers were taught to recognise and target Fireflies first. The presence of a Firefly could draw tremendous attention and risk for its crew, but its absence would have been far worse. As the Allies pressed deeper into France, the Firefly became indispensable during the breakout operations. In Operation Goodwood, Allied forces faced dense concentrations of German armour, and although the operation's success was limited, Fireflies still managed to destroy a significant number of Panthers and Tigers at long range. Their effect multiplied as the Allied advance accelerated. When the encirclement of German forces at Falaise began, Fireflies found themselves in some of the most intense armoured engagements of the war in the West. German units trapped and desperate attempted breakout after breakout, throwing every available tank into the fight. Firefly crews responded with deadly precision, knocking out vehicles as they appeared from smoke and confusion. Some gunners spent entire days firing, repositioning, and firing again, their barrels glowing hot. The Germans could no longer assume their armour gave them automatic superiority. They now had to assume that, hidden somewhere among the Shermans, was a Firefly waiting to put a 17-pounder round straight through their frontal plate. Even more importantly, the Firefly S reputation began spreading among German infantry. Until then, many German units relied heavily on armoured support to repel Allied advances or stabilise collapsing fronts. But once the Firefly appeared, tank support became far riskier. Panzer crews often hesitated, repositioned excessively, or held back longer than they should have, fearing a hidden Firefly. This hesitation created openings the Allies exploited. As July turned into August and the Allies fought to crack open the German lines in Normandy, the Firefly became a force multiplier, magnifying the effectiveness of the entire Sherman fleet. A typical British troop of 4 Shermans now usually contained one Firefly. That single tank provided the long-range punch necessary to counter German heavy armour, allowing the other 3 Shermans to perform their intended roles: infantry support, fast manoeuvre, and exploitation of breakthroughs. Slowly but surely the German laughter faded. The tank the Germans once dismissed as an easy kill had evolved into the single most dangerous Allied armoured threat in the West. Panther and Tiger commanders began reporting kills by Shermans, with long guns in their after-action notes, often expressing disbelief that their own tanks had been penetrated from ranges previously considered safe. The Firefly had done more than appear on the battlefield. It had rewritten the rules of armoured engagement in northern France, but Normandy was just the beginning. Ahead lay the liberation of Belgium, the battles in the Netherlands, and the brutal fighting of the Winter Ardennes campaign. As the Allies pushed toward Germany itself, the Firefly would prove again and again that its impact was no accident or fluke. It was the tank that turned the tide in the West, not because it was perfect, but because it gave the Allies exactly what they needed at exactly the right moment, a weapon that German officers could no longer laugh at. As the Allies surged out of Normandy and across France, the Sherman Firefly's reputation continued to grow, shaping not only the battlefield but the mindset of both sides. By late 1944, the Firefly had become an integral part of British and Commonwealth armoured units pushing through Belgium and the Netherlands. In Operation Market Garden, a bold but ultimately flawed attempt to seize key bridges and force a rapid advance into Germany, Fireflies played a crucial role in holding back powerful German counterattacks. At Arnhem and along the highway infamously nicknamed Hell's Highway, Firefly crews used their long-range fire to break up armoured thrusts that could have crushed the fragile Allied corridor. In these chaotic urban and rural battles, Fireflies once again exploited their best attributes: long-range lethality, the ability to dominate open fields or road approaches, and the element of surprise. German forces, still struggling to replace their armour losses and stretched thin across multiple fronts, were increasingly on the defensive. But the war was far from over, and the next great test for the Firefly came during the winter of 1944-45, when the Germans launched their final major offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. In this desperate gamble, the Germans hurled their remaining armoured strength into the Ardennes, attempting to split the Allied armies and capture vital supply lines. Panzer divisions, including units equipped with Panthers, Tigers, and the dreaded Tigers II King Tiger, smashed into thin American lines while British forces prepared to counterattack from the north. Though American units bore the brunt of the initial assault, British and Canadian forces, including Fireflies, soon moved into position to block German advances and prevent a full breakthrough. The Firefly S-17-pounder gun was one of the few Allied weapons in the West capable of dealing with the heavy armour of the German Tiger II, and several notable engagements occurred where British Fireflies successfully halted or destroyed these massive tanks. In towns like Celle, Hotten, and La Gleize, Fireflies struck German armour from ambush positions, using their superior gun reach to disable or destroy vehicles that even American tank destroyers struggled to penetrate from the front. While the winter terrain, snowstorms, and dense forests limited visibility and engagement ranges, the Firefly S firepower still proved decisive whenever German armour exposed itself. By early 1945, the last illusions of German armoured superiority in the West had collapsed. As Allied forces crossed the Rhine River and pushed deep into Germany, the Firefly continued to serve as the primary tank killer of British and Commonwealth armoured formations. In the open terrain east of the Rhine, where visibility was often excellent and long-range engagements were common, Fireflies became even more deadly. Panthers attempting to set up defensive positions were frequently destroyed before they could fire a single shot. Crews who had once joked about the Sherman now scrawled warnings in unit briefings about Firefly sightings and trained their gunners to identify its distinctive long barrel. Ironically, the tank that had once been mocked by German officers now commanded fear and respect in equal measure. But the Firefly is more than just a weapon that countered enemy armour. It symbolises the ingenuity and adaptability that characterised the Allied war effort. The British did not have time to design a brand new tank, and the Americans did not initially prioritise building a Sherman with a high-velocity gun. So the British improvised. They took a tank that was available in massive numbers, modified it aggressively, and turned it into something far more deadly than the Germans were prepared for. The Firefly's influence did not end with World War II. Its success demonstrated the value of upgunning existing platforms, a lesson seen in post-war tank development, where many nations sought to improve firepower without entirely replacing their fleets. And while the Firefly itself was retired in the late 1940s, the legend it created of a modest, mass-produced tank suddenly transformed into a German armour killer has endured for decades. In hindsight, the Firefly didn't make the Sherman invincible, nor did it completely erase the dangers posed by German armour. Firefly crews still fought in a tall, relatively lightly armoured vehicle, and they remained vulnerable to German guns, mines, and infantry weapons. But what the Firefly did achieve was far more important. It restored balance. It ensured that when a Panther or Tiger appeared on the battlefield, Allied tankers no longer felt helpless. It gave British and Commonwealth forces the ability to strike first, hit harder, and challenge German armoured dominance at the exact moment it mattered most, and perhaps most significantly, it shattered the German perception that Allied tanks were inherently inferior. The laughter stopped. The jokes ended. The Panthers and Tigers that once terrorised Allied crews now had a new predator to fear, a predator disguised as a familiar Sherman, one that carried a gun capable of turning the tables in a split second. By the time the war ended in May 1945, the Sherman Firefly had earned its place among the most important tanks of the Western Front. It was not the fastest, not the toughest, and not the most advanced machine of the war. But it was exactly what the Allies needed, a tank that proved that ingenuity could triumph over arrogance, that adaptation could overcome disadvantage, and that even a workhorse could become a legend. When German officers first laughed at American tanks, they saw only what the Sherman lacked. They could never have imagined that one variant, one long-barreled, re-engineered hybrid would emerge to challenge their best armour and help pave the way to victory. The Sherman Firefly was the answer to a problem that seemed unsolvable, the weapon that forced the Germans to realise the Allies had caught up, and the tank that turned ridicule into respect on battlefields across Europe. And in the end, as Allied soldiers rolled through the ruins of the Third Reich, the Firefly stood as a testament to the idea that sometimes the most unlikely hero is the one that changes history.